start. I didn't have Mark Hauser to remind me to start the recording button, but I just did. So we are recording this call. We will intentionally put it on the web, and we will do this each week. You're free to drop in. You're free to follow along later with the recording, which should go up on the web. So a few things to update and some information. We've been sort of busy trying to pull a number of areas together. Very much, as we'll talk, very much an evolving situation as we go, and we'll continue to respond to it as things unfold. Let me then jump. Should be able now to see my see it on the screen share. For those that are on the online, you should have the screen share. These charts will go up as a PDF on the Hub site as well. So Bishop, we thought if you could begin by giving us, you've just recently updated the pastoral guidelines. They are available on the Hub. Mark Hauser put them up, I believe, last night. But Bishop, could we ask you to talk about those for a moment?
Yeah, we just made some updates with sort of version 2.0, and my thanks to Archdeacon Wayne Varley, who did the legwork on that. As this is an evolving situation, as many of you know, across every aspect of society, and it kind of sometimes can change daily. One of the questions that we had been getting was around, and we've been, all of the bishops in Ontario, we meet every Monday by Zoom call. We'll be meeting again this Monday, and just to kind of keep touch and discuss the issues so we can speak with a concerted voice on this. And we've been so impressed by the work that's happened across all the parishes to keep the church together and keep the worshiping community together through the various platforms that we have. But that's elicited a number of questions around the use of the buildings, who can go into the building, at what times, what are the protocols around that, how many people can go in. And so you'll see that the new pastoral guidelines speak to that in terms of people going into the building, the times they can be there, being very careful and cognizant of the spacing issues around physical distance from one another, sanitation and those kinds of issues, wiping things down, but also the numbers of people that can be in the building around virtual worship services. So what we have said is, given our guidelines, that we would have a worship leader, reader, musician, and camera operator as a maximum, so that we're not gathering a congregation. The number has been continuing to drop in terms of the number of people who can convene publicly, and that probably will continue until they can get the curve flattened down. But we decided for that going into the buildings. That's one of the major updates around those particular issues. We'll keep updating those pastoral guidelines. You'll see them on there. They'll be by the version number and date. So this is version 2 up on today's date. Wayne, is there anything else other than that? Was the biggest part of it was related to the online worship?
Yes, if you compare the version 2 to version 1, last week's was almost exclusively about the provision of pastoral care. Clearly, the matter is more serious and involving more topics, as you mentioned, such as the building. The wonderful news is the creativity of clergy and lay leaders and parishes around worship, but nonetheless, we still need to take care in how that's delivered. And that's why it gets to the point of actual numbers of people who can be in a building at any one time.
Yeah, that was a major thing. And some of the things that are going on, again, to speak to that worship piece as well. All of those worships that have gone online, either through live stream or YouTube or however they've been done, most of them Mark is taking and putting them up on the hub that we have on the main page of our website. So you can actually access services from all across the diocese. We're looking at, there's a couple of things here. We're looking at Holy Week. And what will happen there. One of the strange ironies of this situation is that while we can't be in our buildings, there's opportunities with technology to draw closer together. And so on Maundy Thursday, I'll be doing a service, the renewal of vows, which is traditionally a Maundy Thursday service. We've usually put it on Tuesday in Holy Week, and then last year we moved it to Friday, and the year before, when our primate was here 2 years ago for Holy Week, and to get a better attendance at the cathedral. But I'm going to do a service of renewal of vows, and we're working on a draft of that for Maundy Thursday. That'll be a diocesan service that'll take place at 7 o'clock in the evening, and will be live streamed out of the cathedral. Easter Sunday, I have sent a communication around inviting all those who are doing various types of worship across the diocese. There's quite a few of them. We'll be putting together a liturgy for Easter Sunday at 11 o'clock in the morning, and inviting people to take parts of that, assigning parts, which will be sent in to Mark Hauser. He's going to weave that all together into an Easter liturgy that will truly be a diocesan liturgy from all parts of our diocese, with worship leaders and clergy and lay people participating in it through that medium. So that's something that's been able to happen there. Again, just to reiterate, that we find ourselves in these strange times, and it's been amazing how people have adapted to it from a worship perspective. Anybody have any questions or comments about that?
Okay.
I'll flip it. I think that's about everything that I have in terms of the pastoral guidelines. We just continue to follow in terms of what's happening. You heard me when the prayer when I opened up about Gordy Turnbull, Art Turnbull, who was most recently living on the West Coast now, but was the parish priest in Sydenham. And the sad reality of the situation, Gordy took a massive stroke, was in hospital, and Art could not go in to see her. And they managed to give some time where he could go in and spend a little bit of time, but couldn't be with his wife when she passed. And that just, I can't imagine how terrible that must have been in that situation. But these are the circumstances that we're living in right now, and we move forward with them. So anyway, thanks. I'll flip back to you, Alec, unless there's any other questions.
Thank you, Bishop. So let me pick up a couple of things that have been asked, and things that we'd indicated last week we were working on. So one of the questions around insurance is, with our buildings vacant, for the most part, what is the insurance expectation and obligation? So having discussed it at the provincial level and worked it with ecclesiastical, Aon came out, who's our broker, came out just the end of this week with a document, a bulletin, COVID protecting unoccupied properties. That document is available on the hub. It's a two-side, one page, two sides, provides some guidelines and best practices. But essentially what they're doing is relaxing the expectation on frequency of visits, and really asking to balance that based on risk and protection. Do you have an alarm system, et cetera, and the amount of risk for what is the building is, where it is, what kind of contents there are. But basically the guideline is that the minimum is a weekly check on the building. The more valuable, the more risk it is in terms of where it is, or other things, environmental factors, et cetera, then they're still saying, that should be on a daily basis. But for the most part, it would appear that weekly will maintain the obligation to the insurer. The other ones that we've been talking about was, with our reliance on Canada Post or snail mail, whichever way you care to describe it, for getting money moved between the diocese and churches and vice versa. So work's been going on this week, and Joyce has put a number of things together there. So our intention is that for the quarterly, ready to go on mute, please. Well, unless you're asking a question, just we do get background noise. That we will look to use the process and accounts we use for PAG distribution, that we'll use those to move the quarterly interest payment from the investment fund and the cemetery fund, the care and maintenance funds. We'll look to use that vehicle and to be able to move that money out. So you won't get it in the mail. You will get it directly into your bank account. And then we'll follow that with a PDF-based statement. In the reverse mode, for parishes to be able to provide money into the diocese, that one is just being finalized, but the intention is that hopefully next week we'll come out to you. But the intention is that you'll be able to set the diocese up as a payee in your in online banking, and can make payments to the diocese that way. So that would essentially, for the most part, remove the necessity of having funds moving back and forth between our churches and the diocese by physical mail. So I think in this case, I'm not saying anything that no one on this call doesn't fully recognize, but just again, from a perspective, we know our churches' income is for the most part based on Sunday collection. A number of churches have been very successful with PAG and have a significant amount of their income from that. There's investment income, both from the diocesan fund and funds you may have invested elsewhere, rental income, fees that the church may charge, fundraising and parish groups, and always with a big thanks there to the ACWs, HST rebates, which of course is spending money, and then donations of another, of just a one-time type thing, and grants. But obviously, the closing of the building and no public worship or gathering has a major impact on the income of the church. This document, again, is one that we discussed at the provincial executive officers. We meet weekly as well as the bishops. And actually the national officers, we have a call next week. And the national finance officers, we have an online call next week, looking to share best practices and share solutions that we all come up with. This is just a quick summary card. And again, this will go up on the hub, the Word version of it, which you can choose to use, choose to modify for your own church's purposes. But it looks at the number of different ways that people are able to give money as you consider working through. Obviously, cash and checks that can be mailed, and again, you'll find that a number of businesses will no longer accept cash because of the risk of transmission of the virus living for several days. If you go into a number of businesses, they will no longer take cash. Our own auditor will only take documents after they've been sealed in a box for 3 days. So they're quarantining documents and I guess quarantining money as well. But cash and checks are still possible, particularly through the mail. PAG, I think we've talked about a number of times, but PAG is there. Canada Helps, and I believe Canada Helps should have pretty much, there should be an account out there for just about every church there is. In some cases, though, the churches have not either aware of it or have chosen not to go in and turn their account on and take control of it. So, but Canada Helps is out there. If you go on Canada Helps, you can claim your account for your church. If there isn't one there, you can set one up. And again, Canada Helps can be used for one-time type solutions. It can also be used for regular withdrawals or regular donations. One note there is that the receipt actually comes from Canada Helps, not from the, and it lists the church, but it actually comes from from Canada Helps. And that just means you have to track that as well when you do your T3010 the following year. I will make note of that, that one of the things that the federal government has done is they have moved the deadline for T3010s. Normally the deadline is is to the end of June, and they start harassing you after that. And if you're not done by December of the following year, they will pull your number. This year they're not. The deadline is moved to the end of the year, but I would still recommend we get those in before the end of the year. So Canada Helps is there as an option. Interact e-transfers. Again, your church can set up, go online with your bank and set yourself up as a payee. And then from there, a donor can find the church as one of their potential payees, set it up, make the donation with any comment, and that would go straight to the church's account. And then finally, one that most we don't seem to pay too much attention to, but PayPal, which is a popular online payment system. PayPal does also allow you to do charitable donations if the church chooses to set it up that way. And we've listed on here what the fees look like for each of those. So that document will go up on the hub as a Word document, and you can, if you want to work with it and leave that for people, that's fine. So one of the things we look at is as parishes now, they see their funds decrease. How do you fund a deficit? Well, the first, when you have a month where you have less income than expense, the bank accounts first, including overdraft. Some parishes will do a special appeal or a fundraiser. Some churches have access to a credit line. Some parishes will then draw on investments outside the diocesan fund or within. And then finally, some also choose to use the diocese as the funder and not meet their obligations to the other churches of the diocese, and we carry that as a loan. So just to put the diocese in perspective, just a high level to give you a bit of a view, the diocesan expenses are basically $135,000 a month. And you can see it's broken down, the biggest piece being payroll for the bishop's office, my office, accounting staff, ministry and program office, the rest of the staff. About $27,000 goes to the national church, and among other things, the national office, but also the Church of the North and the missions going on there with our Indigenous church. Our facilities costs. There's some things that I've called non-cash, which is basically depreciation, as well as some areas we think we can reduce, because there's things like no traveling at the current time, and then other, which is grants and various committee activity funding. It's about $135,000 a month is what we typically consume, and 105 of that comes from CMM. The rest comes from investment, returns, fees, and donations. So if I look at it from what we acquire from parishes each month, obviously that 105,000 of CMM is what keeps the diocesan machine moving. The diocese, basically, we pay the payroll for the complete central payroll. That's about, sorry, we got some background noise. Let me just see if I can, there. I've muted everyone for a moment. I'll unmute it when we come to questions again. Basically, each month we run around $290,000 of payroll that is paid for on parish's behalf. So that's money that is withdrawn by the bank in order to pay the clergy in order to pay the lay staff in the parishes. That's about 290,000 comes out a month. And of course, we look for that back through our payroll and account billings out to churches. We also have insurance, which over 11 months is about $23,000. And again, the diocese pays Aon and then collects that from the churches. So what that means basically is that for a normal state without the diocese going into a deficit or having to borrow money, basically require let's call it $420,000 a month to come in from churches. The general position for the diocese at the moment, if you look at all of the balances, our operating account, the investment account, some of the special purpose funds with things we have, we've got just under $600,000 of cash at the moment. There's another $100,000 approximately available on the line of credit. That line of credit has $1.5 million limit. One of the things that jumped in February when we put basically $250,000 of insurance due into the parish accounts. So that our line of credit jumped. That's how we finance, amongst other things, the receivables from the churches, which as of the end of February was about $750,000. If you look at what's in the investment fund, the diocese has that is basically that which belongs to the diocese, not to the churches, although we all own the whole thing, is about $2.4 million. And that's a mixture of everything from the funds that from 90 Johnson Street sale through to a lot of the special purpose and some of the restricted funds that exist there as well. So there's about $2.5 million of diocese money apart from the parish money in the central investment fund. The other thing to note is a quarterly payment for the national church is due. That's $83,000. And of course, the end of the month, we have the payment to churches for the investment fund, and that's about $175,000. The investment fund, as of Monday, was sitting at about $17 million. The cemetery fund's about $1.5 million. That means there's a total between the two of about $18.5 million. At year end, on fair market value, we had $21.9 million. So what you see from that is that the investment fund has taken about a 15% hit since the beginning of the year. To put that in perspective, the Toronto Stock Exchange is down over 35% since Jan the 1st. And of course, one of the reasons that ours is the loss for the fund is half or less than half is because of the equity versus debt mix, where we are about 60% debt long-term funds, which of course don't fall at the same rate as equity does. So the more conservative nature of our investment policy basically has kept the loss to about half of what the market hit is. I will take things off mute for a moment and see if there's any questions to this point. Okay, not hearing any questions, I'll turn the mute back on so we cut back the noise, and I will move forward to the next. So the critical thing for us at this juncture is cash, and it goes back to my corporate days, but cash is king. Cash gives you the ability to meet your obligations, whether that's payroll, whether that's rent, whether that's the debt to the national, the obligation of the national and provincial, to the other expenses, to the ministries, et cetera, within the diocese. It also allows us to take and provide cash to churches from the investment fund. As you draw down to meet your deficits, we need cash available to be able to do that. One of the focuses is conserving cash to make sure we use it on the most critical things So we're trying to exercise caution in cash management. We're also exercising caution in expense management. So basically anything where we can, that is discretionary spending, we are looking to reduce or eliminate so that we are only spending that which is absolutely critical to the operation. Some other things that I'll just provide quick updates on. The federal government announced a program for payroll, which can contribute up to 10% of a small business's payroll, up to a cap of 25,000. I think it's 1,375 or something a month, up to 25,000. And so that is obviously a helpful thing. Unfortunately, because of the way that we are structured doing central payroll, the CRA sees us as one employer, as one remitting employer. So that's because we have a common payroll. There's only one business number that everything comes into. And in fact, they're using the payroll deduction account to fund it. They're basically saying you can keep up to 10% of it and not remit it. That's how they're looking to actually provide the money. But what it means is we can only claim that once at the diocesan level. We can't claim that based upon each individual church because again, there's only the CRA sees us as one remitting employer. So what we will do is we will access that as once they've made it clear how it can be done, and then we will share that against our payroll account to reduce by that amount spread across all churches. We mentioned earlier about stewardship, and of course the focus on that at the local level is critical to keep people not only to be pastorally connected, to be connected from a community and social point of view, but also to be connected to ensure that folks are aware of the stewardship needs of the church and how you can enable people to continue to support the church financially as best they can. One of the risks for us is a heavy drawdown on the investment funds. There's several elements of that. One being that, as I mentioned, our fund is down 15%. That we've been able to absorb so far from the retained piece that we've had. That's how we keep the fund evened out with a 5% return, even though there's not always that return there. But we've been drawing that down. It also means that it has a number of other impacts if we have to start adjusting the portfolio based upon having to draw heavy amounts. So we're very conscious of that. Diocesan cash, as I talked about, the line of credit, and our access to investments are also limited. And then we just need to think about the future impact as things go back to normal with a large potentially receivables to work through, and then reduced amounts of investments, some of the things that some of that money was targeted for. But I think the biggest thing for all of us at this point is we must manage a situation that's changing on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour basis with many unknowns at a given point. And we need to continue to focus on managing that as the situation evolves. So some of the action plans we're putting forward for the parish level, and I mentioned, having a stewardship focus along with the pastoral and community care focus. Again, asking that, churches that can meet their obligations, so payroll, CMM, insurance, they're local, that need to do so for the good of all, because as we go through this, some churches are better positioned to work their way through. Some of our churches, not just small ones or just rural ones, are going to be significantly impacted, and we're going to need together to work to be able to support those churches. One of the proposals we're putting through is that we are of course paying Aon for insurance, but we'll carry that interest free for churches until we reopen our buildings for worship. Second thing is looking at a grant for churches who've not yet gone online for worship and wish to. And again, as the bishop mentioned, some very creative ways out there. Some churches I know want to try and expand that a little bit. Others are trying to figure out how to come online. Not large amounts of money, but we're looking at being able to support, to be able to take subscriptions for services online that would help you do that. We've got a number of churches that have taken advantage of our offer on GoToMeeting, where we can extend free accounts out to churches. A number of churches using Zoom, which is another alternative. Some are using live streaming. Some may be looking at a little bit of hardware to be able to do better production. So again, what we're just trying to get together now, and hopefully we'll have out there next week, is a grant program. It won't be a big, huge amount of money, but to support churches that are struggling to work their way through. And of course, that would also be backed up with us trying to be helpful with advice and consulting. The other step we're taking, and I'll speak to this in a little more detail, is we're asking churches to provide financial information and forecasting monthly. And so that's for a number of reasons. For those that we know who's going to be able to meet their obligations, we know who can't, and we can work and try and build a plan there, make sure that there's sufficient available to support. And also that, as we had talked, and a number of you have provided me both with this type of forecast, but also with investment fund forecast, so that we can try and make sure that there are funds available as churches need them. So this is, you'll shortly be receiving a spreadsheet that looks like this, and you can fill it in Excel, you can fill it in with a pen and paper, whatever way works for you. But we're just basically looking at, for each month, we're asking for March and April at this point, what your revenue looks like, what you expect it to look like, the open offering that comes in that way, PAGs, rental, investment, and other expenditures at the level of the clergy costs, lay staff, insurance, building costs, and any other, CMM. And then that will then, the revenue less the expenses will show whether there's a deficit or a surplus, and then how you would intend to cover that surplus, or cover that deficit, or spend the surplus. And then just to kind of wrap this part up, the diocesan level, we're working to conserve our resources to support as the crisis continues. As I mentioned earlier, we're looking to minimize discretionary spending across the piece, looking to prioritize payments from the investment funds, and this will be where we'll to parishes that forecast. We're also asking for you to do a monthly withdrawal rather than a single large one. So with that in mind, we're at this point placing a cap at $25,000 a month in terms of what can be withdrawn. That would equate, even if a church had no income coming in, to an annual budget of about $300,000, and so there should be very few churches in that category. If there's a particular challenge, then please flag it. But right now we're looking to cap payments out at $25,000 a month. We are asking our advisor broker to have a $500,000 short-term fund available to us, so that we have liquidity available. We're also looking, as we go through this, for the common good. I think those who were on the call last week, I mentioned about mutual support for the common good and what that ends up becoming as we work our way through. And then we continue to respond and adapt as we learn more and the situation evolves. So, and each month, Synod Council, which met this week online, will continue to review the situation, and we will continue to adapt as we go forward. So I will take the line off mute again, and that was what I had to cover. We'll turn back over for questions.
Alex?
Yes.
Bill Russell from Napanee. You mentioned that there is possibly and may very well be one lump sum coming to the diocese from the federal government.
It wouldn't be a lump sum from the federal government. We would be able to draw down up to 10% of the payroll, which would have a cap of 25,000 for the program. Yep. And that would be money
Okay.
that we would not pay the government back. They would, and we have yet to see the details on the program to know how to do it. So our intention there is that $25,000, we would basically take that and apply that to the payroll account and reduce. You know, everybody would go in proportion to what that. So if you're 1% of the diocesan's central payroll, you'd get 1% of that credit.
Okay, that was part A of the question. Then just that it's on a prorated basis, then that it's going to be given out.
That's the plan. Yep.
Okay, thank you very much.
Other questions?
Alex, this is Doug Noyles.
Oh, Doug.
Hi. Just wanted to get your confirmation that you received our forecast.
I did. Yep. We are just now trying to
Thank you.
we're trying to consolidate our inputs and then come back and confirm to each and confirm that we've got it, pardon the expression, confirm that we've got it right.
Okay, thank you.
And thank you. A couple of churches, and St. John's Bath is one that responded even before we put the form together. And we've got a number of churches that have started to feed us information, and thank you.
Alex, when are those forms coming out? We don't have anything yet.
You should have it. I'm just sitting here this afternoon getting it. Part of what I wanted to do was just ask if anybody had any input back from what I showed you a minute ago, and then once I make any last adjustments, I will get it off. Mark and I will get it off this afternoon.
Okay, thank you.
No.
So let me ask a question then, right? It's we are all sort of living in a funny kind of world right now, where the world is little windows that are, a couple of inches wide through at the diocese. But what's the at your local levels, kind of what's the where's the mood, where's the mindset, and what are people thinking?
Well, can you hear me, Alex?
Yep, go ahead, George.
Sorry. Well, I took care, excuse me, and I'll do it again starting the first of the week. I took our phone roster and I phoned everybody that goes to our church and I spoke to them. They all seem to be upbeat. Kind of the one question they had is some people, and is about an Easter service. That's kind of disappointing to a lot of people and myself. But I think the upbeat of our parishioners at St. John's seem to be upbeat. And I'll know more of that when I phone next week. I suspect it will be, but everybody that I spoke to seemed to be upbeat and they're being cautious and they realize what they have to do. But as far as the church goes, they seem to be staying upbeat, and I'm glad for that.
Thank you, George, and thank you for that. Again, phone calls are one of the few ways we can at this point stay connected like that. And I think that's so important. And thank you for taking on that ministry and that work to stay in touch with people.
Can I just
You're
add?
welcome.
Can I just add in there too? And thanks, George, for that. I mean, that's a big issue, is the staying in connection. And when the bishops have met, we've talked about that. One of the phrases that come up along a lot is looking at 2 points of contact, where the first point of contact is by telephone for those members of our diocese who don't have access to the kind of technology that allows them to be on YouTube or Facebook or live stream or connect to the web or anything like that, to be able to keep in touch with them. because loneliness and isolation are huge issues, especially in this where everybody has to hunker down. The second point of contact around that, and one of the examples that was used is the parish of the Valley in the Diocese of Ottawa, where they did a phone contact, and then the team went out with newsletters. And I know some parishes are doing newsletters up and where they hand deliver them and drop them in the mailbox. Those things have happened as well. So which has been really good, just to stay in contact with our people. But I would want to comment too about and I know there's a lot of sadness around the fact that we cannot gather for the foreseeable future, and especially through Holy Week and Easter. And the phrase that the bishops had been using in the conversation that we had, where we had to take that decision around the suspension of worship, and then later to extend that out even more, is that as it comes to the Eucharist, and we're saying through this point we're fasting from the Eucharist, but we are feasting on the Word, and we're finding ways to connect with our people in terms of prayer, in terms of exposition on the Scripture, Bible studies, whatever way we can to keep connected so that we feast on the Word over this time where the community cannot gather to celebrate the Eucharist. But I know that that's hard for many people. It's difficult for all of us. It's such a central part of our identity as the body of Christ. But anyway, we will get through this. But I'm happy to take any questions on that as well.
Dale Redding from St. John's in Sterling. And as the warden, I do reach out to my members once a week. We also have a group called the Halos, which has been functioning now for about 5 years. These are faithful women. And there's about 5 or 6 in that group, and each one of them have a list of the members, and they're contacting them 2 or 3 times a week. And we also, on our website, that we have our Reverend Nancy has an evening prayer every evening, and we have that, and we have all the prayers for the week are also up on that website. Great. So and they know, and I have myself being a registered nurse, I'm retired, but I've been getting contacts from my members about medical things, which is a good thing. They're kind of hesitant, but they call, and I'm very happy to deal with that. So that's another contact that they can have that way. And again, I will say the same, that they are upbeat. They do miss congregating, they do miss being together, but we are a family, and as a family, we'll get through this together at the local level and at the diocesan level. So, and thank you again for all that you're doing to get us together for once a week. Thank you.
Thank you, Dale.
Alex, Barb Gilbert from St. Thomas Belleville. Thank you very much for putting all of this on. And it's good to hear from other people what they're doing. We too have a telephone tree. I like the idea of a newsletter through the door, which we hadn't thought about doing. So thanks for that. And once again, our congregation is doing quite well. One question that keeps coming up, and it's more a sort of a philosophical one, and certainly we can't answer it instantly, and that is sort of, how does the church be relevant to society during this crisis, so that when this crisis is over, people say, wow, that church, whatever church it might be, really came through. They helped me. Like, how can we do that? And we are talking about this and struggling with this, but I think that it's an important question for us to address in all our ways. Yes, it's absolutely crucial we look after our own parishioners, for sure, but there's a big wide world out there that also needs us. So we're trying to keep our outreach programs going as best we can. It's a bit of a struggle, and financially it'll be more of a struggle as we continue, I expect. But anyway, that's our sort of our overriding philosophical thing. How can we be relevant to the rest of the world?
I know I watched, Barbara, a video from St. Thomas's this morning that came out on the Chile, a nice little 2-minute video around that outreach program and what you're doing there. I mean, one of the things, again, one of the spin-offs of this is that we've been able to see the things that are happening around the diocese. There are a lot of outreach programs that are going and that cover the gamut. And one of the part of that, for example, Lunch by George at the cathedral, that they serve hundreds. And the question is, how are they going to do that? The beauty of it is that in a lot of our communities, there are organizations and individuals who are pulling people together into a wider partnership to see how they can support one another. And the churches are a vital part of that partnership. It allows us to engage beyond our doors. So Lunch by George in their work, being able to get supported with food donations and things like that, but they've gone now to a takeout way of doing it, where they prepare the food, two of the staff prepare the food, and it's handed out at the door. So there are things that are happening to continue that. The beauty of the communications piece is that we're hearing about things across the church, and it's also giving ideas for other people in terms of things that they could try to engage with that. I would go back to what Bishop Andrew Absol in Toronto said early on in this. I think it was one of our first calls that we had after this pandemic was declared. And he said this will be an opportunity for the church to rise up and really be the church visibly in the world. And another phrase that is used a lot is that the church has left the building, but the church has been deployed. It's out in the world and active. And so I think that these provide opportunities for us in the midst of this. So again, I think Alec had put up in the when we did the wardens and treasurers piece, I think that little card, Alec, and it's available on our hub too, where you can go around the neighborhood and just say, hi, I'm so-and-so, I live at such and so, this is my number. If you need groceries, I can get your groceries for you, or something like that. It just depends on the circumstance and situation. There's a really good video making the rounds right now. I just watched it before I started on my meetings this afternoon. I may send that in. I just saw it. I didn't have an opportunity, Alec or Wayne, to touch base with you or Mark about it. But it's a doctor in the States who goes over how to make your home safe, how to bring food in the house, how to deal with stuff. It's a 13-minute video, and it's well worth watching. I think it's had over 13 or 14 million views since it went up 3 or 4 days ago, because people are trying to find out how do we protect the most vulnerable in our communities and reach out and be supportive. And we want to be supportive in ways that are honoring the need to be safe. So there's things like that are happening. But your point is really well taken, Barb. That's there are a lot of good things happening, but it's an opportunity for us to really reach out beyond our doors, literally.
Thank you, Bishop.
It is. I'll just one extra sort of thought to that. In discussion with the provincial executive officer, so Harry Huskins, Harry's extremely well wired at the political level, and sort of flows in and out of Queen's Park. And regardless of what your view of our provincial government at this time is, one of the ministers approached Harry and really wanted to know what are our churches doing that at the community level, particularly around the feeding programs and around homelessness. What are our churches doing? Because the government's asking that question. And so I think one of the things that is good in that is that we still have a place. That we were, one of the cabinet ministers followed through to check with the provincial church to see where, what are you doing? Where is your place with this? What else might we be able to do to help? So I think that's a positive indicator that we may not be as badly out of thought as we were afraid of. So and we've had a host of things. I mean, I responded with things like Lunch by George, around things like we're still trying to keep the 12-step programs, enable our buildings to be used for 12-step programs, et cetera. So that there's some exceptions there.
Good afternoon, Alex. Mike Lindsay from St. James.
Good afternoon, Mike.
Thank you for this, and thank you for the bishop's words. This is an extremely helpful medium, these formats. We're doing quite well. One of the things that was brought up by one of our financial people is we have noticed a tremendous drop-off on collection plate. So when we're reporting this via your reporting mechanism, I think the first month the numbers are going to look really rather kind of odd, and it's strictly because we're all just trying to get used to this. But it has allowed us to use this medium to go out and provide services. We're having an excellent opportunity right now between St. James and St. Mark's to do services back and forth, and it's been an excellent opportunity. On the whole, I would say we're doing well. We're having some difficulty with some of our communications to some of our members, but this has been a process to get us to think around how to do that. One of the issues that has come up, though, is we have a ministry to correctional services, which is becoming increasingly difficult because their system is locked down. So the people that we were able to interact with, we're currently out of touch with. And that's one that we're struggling with at this particular point. Lastly, Alex, if I could, a personal favor is at some point in the next couple of days, I'd like to talk to you offline.
Sure. I am working from home, but fully connected.
Super. I'd like to have a chat with you if I could.
Sure.
So but like I say, on the whole, I think this is a fantastic way of us communicating. I've learned a tremendous amount just what the different parishes and the like are doing. I think I'm more in touch with the diocese than I have been in quite some time.
There are good things come from difficult times. So it's one of the things, by the way, and I've had a number of churches we've extended GoToMeeting accounts to, just to give you a feel, good things, hard times, but we, just as an office staff, those of us in the office, we realize we meet every morning. We have a call on here. This afternoon at 4 o'clock, we're going to have an online meeting that has no business. And the idea is just for us to be able to do some of the social chat that normally in the office you interact with each other, socially, and you lose that when you tend to lose that when you're in these models. So we decided that we're going to get together just to try and shoot the breeze. And so I would also encourage you that things like GoToMeeting, because you can use, as some are for audio, for those that aren't online, you can bring people together, just let them chat.
Yeah.
Wayne Thornhill.
Thank you for that, Alan.
Hello? Yeah, Wayne Thornhill from St. James in Maitland. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you, Wayne.
Okay, good. Just a little update on what's going on down here. In terms of keeping in contact, well, I know my wife, Doreen, she sat down last week and called everybody that she could get a hold of on our parish list, and everybody seems to be doing well or has somebody who's helping them. And we've also, well, this is across our parish, set up a buddy system, so people have connected with other people, and every morning or every second day or whatever they have agreed upon amongst themselves, they call each other just to make sure you're okay and everything's going well. So that's a constant thing that I think people really enjoy, that personal contact. Also, we have an electronic newsletter, an email newsletter called In the Loop that we have been doing for some time, but it goes out to over 200 people, I believe, within our three churches, St. Paul, St. John, and St. James. And everything that people need to know is on that. And the lady who handles it, anytime there's a special notice to be sent out, she sends out that notice to all of those people as well. We do know there's a couple of people here and there who don't have email, so we try to make sure they're brought up to date. We're sending out a message now about mailing. So all three church addresses are on there for anyone who wishes to mail in checks or post-dated checks or whatever they'd like, or they can call one of us and we'll make arrangements to pick it up from them. So that's just a little bit about what we've been doing to keep in touch and try to keep the ball rolling as best we can.
That's great, Wayne. That's precisely the kind of stuff that keeps us drawn together. Excellent.
Well, we're just coming up on the 3 o'clock hour. Does anybody have any other comments or questions?
Alec, if I could just make a brief comment about the creative ways in which we establish community, gather for worship, etc. Pastorally too, this is a time of stress and strain and anxiety. And I hope all of us as key leaders, clergy and lay, will have a handle on what our limits are. And be able to step away if need be, for a day or whatever. I don't know about others, but I found the last couple of weeks I'm certainly working differently and seemingly having to work harder to keep the same things going and afloat. And so therefore, pastorally, I think it's good for us to have a handle on who we are and what our limits will be, assuming this will last for weeks and possibly months.
That's right.
Thanks, Wayne. Bishop?
I have a comment.
Sorry, go
George
ahead.
Vale again. Just to go back to the thing you were talking about, the insurance, just to ease people's mind. I'm into our church, St. John's in Prescott. Probably at least 3 times a week I go in just to check, make sure the heat on the hall and the church is working well, and that everything else seems to be working well. And then I have a favor, if I would, from all the people that can hear me. We have a parishioner that's lying in the hospital right now. He's not too good of health. Stan Francis, a prayer for him and his wife Maureen. They're both in their 80s, and they've been going to that church since the early 50s. They were married there. Their children were Christians there, and they both plan on being buried from that church, hopefully a long time from now. But just a prayer from them. The sad thing for Maureen is I phone her pretty near every other day that she can't get in the hospital to see her husband.
Yeah.
So if your prayer would be there, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. So shall I close with prayer, Alec, or we have
Please,
anything
yeah.
else?
Thank you. And as I said, we will meet again next week. The line
Okay.
will be open, and we'll do this again next week.
Alex,
And
are you going to send a summary out of the highlights of today's meeting?
The chart package that I used will be on the hub probably later this afternoon or Monday morning, depending. Mark's a little busy, but the recording of this and the presentation package will be on the hub.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and just a comment about the work Mark is doing. I've been recording these Sunday services and the Coventry litanies and the other communication pieces that have been needed to be done lately. His work level has just gone right up through the ceiling. So, and he's really handling it with great aplomb, I must say. So thanks for that. So we'll close the meeting off with prayer. And George, just Stan and Maureen, did I get the names right?
Yes, Stan and Maureen Francis.
Stan and Maureen Francis. Okay, let us pray. Gracious and loving God, we give you praise and thanksgiving once more for the opportunity we've had to come together as church over this medium to discuss the challenges we face, the hopes that we have, and the expectations that are in our hearts for the future. We pray especially for those continuing to deal with this new situation, those dealing directly with COVID-19, but all of the effects of that as well. We pray especially for those who are suffering this day, those in hospital, and again, the frontline healthcare workers, but particularly we hold up to you, Stan and Maureen Francis, today. We pray especially for them and the difficulty and hardship of the restrictions that are placed on visitation. I pray that we are joined in heart and soul over these days. Even in these difficulties, you are present with us by the Spirit, and as nothing can separate us from the love of God, so St. Paul proclaims, we know that we are never separated from one another for the great joy of being part of the body of Christ in this place. Be present with our clergy, with our lay leaders, and with all we serve over these days. Our mission, not only within the church, but out to the world in which you have placed us. Strengthen us, encourage us, and give us hope. In Jesus' holy name we pray. Amen.
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 Thank
For
you.
me, George, thank you, Bishop, and thank you, Alex.
Thank you very much. Our privilege.
From Dale, thank you, and we'll meet again next Friday.
We shall.
Thanks, folks.
For Mike,
Yeah.
thank you, Bishop. Thank you, Alex. And I look forward to speaking to you later, Alex.
Okay,
Very good.
thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Bishop. Thank you, Mike.
You're
Thank
very
you,
welcome.
Alex.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much for the information and all the hard work that the diocese does for every parish.
Thank you.